Hey, deserving listeners. So if you heard a recent episode in which I had attorney Allison on the podcast answering questions from y'all about the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, you know that we got a lot of our questions answered in that episode, but attorney Craig was the person that I was talking with the most throughout the trial. Originally, I was going to have attorney Allison and attorney Craig on the same episode, but attorney Craig had an emergency that he had to deal with, so we are recording this later. So before we get into this episode, I just want to provide the following disclaimer. Attorney Craig's statements and comments presented within the following broadcast are not legal advice in any way, shape, or form and should not be interpreted as such. They are his own personal opinions informed by nearly 2 decades of experience as a litigator. If you or anyone else close to you are currently facing a sort of legal issue or need legal advice, Attorney Craig encourages you to seek a qualified lawyer in your jurisdiction or state. You can do this by visiting the American Bar Association's website, where you can find a searchable directory. Simply conduct an internet search for American Bar Association Lawyer Directory, and you will have immediate access to this directory, which enables you to locate a qualified attorney in your state or jurisdiction for your specific needs. Welcome to the podcast, Attorney Craig.
I've been a fan of you and your content, and excuse me if I'm fanboying out a little bit here. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you were the first attorney, I think, that contacted me, and we would email back and forth several times a day as I was posting things and asking you questions. So you saved me from making a fool out of myself in a lot of the episodes regarding all sorts of things. So welcome to the podcast, Attorney Craig. Okay, so first question from Gina from the UK. Do you agree with the verdict in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial?
Overall, yes, I do. I think all of the evidence that was presented points pretty conclusively in that direction.
Okay. Listener Lisha said, how could Amber Heard have had a stronger case with the evidence that she had?
Yeah. If you're going to make a burrito and you have certain ingredients, you only have these ingredients. You're asking, how can you make the burrito taste 100% better with the exact same ingredients? I don't think necessarily they could have. What I will say is it comes down to credibility in these defamation cases. These defamation cases are very strange, in my opinion, very, very difficult to prove, very, very difficult to meet that burden. So the name of the game is credibility, and that's not the case in the cases that I'm involved with, for example. So a defamation case, specifically with celebrity, it can be tough. So a few things, that I think would have helped her. She had this habit that I think has been commented on a lot of sort of looking at the jury at these kind of very strange moments. I think most people interpreted that in a very cringeworthy way. That didn't help her. I strongly suspect that her attorneys instructed her to do that, but I suspect she went rogue a bit there, So so to answer the listener's question, I think maybe she would have had a better shot if she had been more natural on the stand. And then also there were points where she could have not lied, and it actually would have helped her, and one that comes to mind specifically was the semantic game she was playing about the donate pledge business. She could have couched it in such a way. She could have said, I said that on that program. I said I donated it, but I wasn't under oath. I said that. Some things came up and decided it wasn't best for me at that time. I still intend to in the future, or however, they could have formulated some way to couch it. But doing that would have cut it off at the knees. That would have ended the line of questioning right there. And in fact, that would have helped her, because she would have seen, been perceived as more credible, as more straightforward. And I think the likelihood that the jurors would have believed more of her statements would have dramatically increased.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and I think I might have even said it in the video. And you said it perfectly. It would have just cut it off at the knees. It just say, you know what? I don't know if I want to say I lied, but I said I donated, but I didn't. And looking back, I think it was kind of dumb for me to say that. I did intend on donating it, but I hadn't donated it technically yet. And so I didn't think of it as a lie because I thought I would eventually do it. And then once I ran into other money problems like this trial, I decided I can't donate. Just say something. But
right.
The constant defensiveness in her attitude around that, and her saying that pledge and donate are the same word. And just based on that one sentence that she says, as a juror, you could conclude, so do you think abuse and not abuse is the same word? Just because you want it to be that way?
Yeah, I agree. And you're saying, well, that doesn't seem right, or why, that doesn't jive with her facial expressions. Like something doesn't feel right with it. That's what the jury's thinking as well.
So if you were working on the case, hypothetically, I'm just going to take a guess and say that the legal team knew the gist of what she would say in response to those questions because they knew they would come up.
Right.
And I'm also going to take a guess that Amber Heard, at least the topic sentence of her responses to those questions were established and agreed upon. I mean, just going off that assumption, I guess there's this possibility that she went completely rogue, as he said, and the attorneys on her team are just like, why are you answering it that way? We went over this, but that's pretty unlikely, right? So what do you think was going through her lawyers' minds as they were preparing?
When you're preparing a witness for trial, you're spending multiple, 4-hour sessions with them. It's not up to chance. Everything is calculated, rehearsed, practiced for hours, for days. They were practicing with her and role playing. I'm trying to put this as politely as possible. As I imagine that they were disappointed probably with some of her testimony. Because they probably were thinking, we rehearsed this, we went over this. This is what we practiced.
You say that because it's hard to imagine that they would have approved of that style of responding. It's like there's very low likelihood that the team would have said, yes, that's the way you should respond to those questions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
I very much think that that's what happened, that she kind of went her own way, disregarded some of what her lawyers rehearsed with her. And in fact, I think we had emailed about this before. There's a saying in Latin that you learn your first year of law school, which translates to false in one thing, false in everything. Actually, a lot of jurisdictions in our country, in the U.S., abide by it, and the judge will give that instruction.
Yeah, I think you said that in the email, that it wouldn't be unusual for a judge in that scenario, after the testimony or even before deliberation, the judge would have a talk with the jury and say, by the way, just want to remind you that if you believe that if one of the witnesses was lying once, then it might be prudent to disregard everything that they said. Because they're under oath and they're supposed to be telling the truth,
No, exactly.
So what, aside from Amber Heard's testimony, was the most impactful testimony? Speaking
as a civilian, I thought Johnny Depp's friend, Isaac Baruch, I thought he was very effective. He was a great witness, relatable, very authentic. I mean, he was weeping on the stand for his friend. And then what made him even a greater witness is that he was up close and personal with all of these events. He lived next door. He had firsthand knowledge of these events.
Yeah, it's interesting to look back on the sequence of witnesses. He was very early, I think maybe number 2 or something. Right. There was the sister and then him, I think. I remember having a similar feeling of, because I don't know anything about Johnny Depp really as a person, as a non-actor. When I heard the sister's testimony, I'm thinking, well, okay, that's interesting. She didn't really have much to say. She almost seemed kind of not willing to be there. It was like pulling teeth from both sides, really. And then with the friend, as you said, very relatable. The picture that he painted, not only of the critical event on May 21st and the next day when he, saw her and claimed he didn't see anything, any bruises or anything. Maybe even more importantly, for me anyway, the tone that he sent of who Johnny Depp was as a human being, that he was an old friend from a long time ago. And Johnny Depp liked his art and said, hey, I'll do whatever it takes to give you a place and a home and the materials and the connections so that you can do your art, and then he breaks down crying, talking about how much Johnny Depp did for him and he was a good friend. And it just gave this impression that Johnny Depp behind the scenes wasn't one of those famous people that is a monster behind the scenes, and who knows what really is the case, obviously. But
Right.
And I wonder, what do you think about this, that the Johnny Depp legal team thought, because I could see them thinking in terms of chronology. So they have the sister come out because she can speak to his childhood, which sets this really good foundation for everything moving forward, which was when we were young, we were abused by our mom. And the two of us, particularly Johnny, would escape into his room or the bathroom. He never fought back. He was always passive, and he just wanted to get away. They laid that out early, and they would return to that. It's a very clear strategy of like, let's connect it to the child. And then the second witness, they're like, so this person can comment on Amber Heard, but also it can lay the foundation for who Johnny Depp is as a human being.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And there were many witnesses on the Johnny Depp side that were unpaid. They were there because they wanted to be there. They were there because they wanted to provide support for their friend or their former employer. Whereas every single one of Amber Heard's witnesses were paid to be there, except for her sister. And in fact, one of Amber Heard's main defenders in this whole saga was her friend, Roxy Pennington. And she, in the deposition leading up to this case, she made it clear that they were former friends. And if you notice, they did not call her as a live witness in the trial.
Meaning that cross-examination would ask her, are you still friends with her? And she'd say, no. Why? And then she would...
It would open up a whole thing. Exactly.
Right. What was I saying that you think needs to be cleared up somehow? I'm sure there are a few things, at least.
Yeah. And some of our earlier email exchanges about the experts, right? Let's be very clear about their role and why they're there. They are retained by the legal team. And they are sought out and hired because they are going to say certain things. Okay. And that is understood. That is explicitly understood.
Meaning that during the hiring process,
absolutely.
What sort of things might each side have said to their respective psychology experts? Yeah,
not even might. I mean, it's very explicit. Can you testify to A, B, and C?
Prior to the examination by the clinician.
Prior to the engagement, prior to being retained.
Wow. Would that question be on the record at all, or would that be off the record?
No, because that... to be a little careful here. I'll just say those types of discussions are over the phone. I don't want to be so cynical. I guess what I'm getting at is that they hire a certain individual for a reason. For example, Dr. Hughes. They absolutely interviewed her prior to retaining her, and they said, A, B, and C would really bolster our case. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, prior to examining Amber Heard.
Right. And she wants to get hired, and for this particular case, there's a lot of exposure. Actually, I think she said she was charging $500 an hour. Maybe after this trial, she could charge $1,000 an hour. So she wants the job.
Might they have provided some of the data during the interview?
Oh, yeah, sure. And that's not improper either.
I don't know if you heard me speculate that you could have different levels of explicit to implicit or even unconscious influence. Like if a legal team comes to an expert and says something like, our client is claiming that she was abused by Johnny Depp, and we are looking for someone to help us out with this, and they don't try to influence the expert at all. And even say, look, we want you, Dr. Hughes, to conduct your own examination and your own findings, and we will go with whatever you say, which of course would never happen. But just imagine the legal team says that. And Dr. Hughes is going to hold to, she's like, okay, I'm going to hold myself to an ethical, objective examination and report writing, and I'm going to hold the line because I have the freedom to do that, and I hold myself to a high level of integrity. And then she proceeds with the examination, but in the back of her mind, she knows what they are looking for. And two, she's thinking about her future as a career-minded person. Of course, they are, right? You couldn't get there if you weren't very career-minded. I mean, that's just another piece of the background for people that don't know. To get to the level of Dr. Curry and particularly Dr. Hughes, I mean, Dr. Hughes, I'm guessing, and to her credit, is obsessed with her career. I mean, the things that she has accomplished in her lifetime, one of the 15 major accolades that they listed off would be the pinnacle of many clinicians' careers. And she has so many. So she is very interested and has been for 30 years to further her career. And you would imagine that what sort of cases you get. I think she worked on the R. Kelly case as well. And there are so many forensic psychologists that are vying for those kinds of gigs for the reasons you said earlier. So let's say, I'm going to have my integrity, but in the back of her mind, she's thinking, okay, what if I come out against Amber Heard, or it's in the gray zone? What does that mean for me in the future? Does that mean I'm going to not be hired in the future? There are many other cases where similar sorts of clients. And what if I undermine my track record and my credibility, or my shtick, if you will, by being wishy-washy in this case? What does that mean for me in the future? And then that influences things, because everything clearly in these forensic psychology reports are at least somewhat based on opinion, because you see two forensic psychologists, both qualified, looking at just one item, the MMPI, and interpreting it in the opposite ways. So clearly there's some room there for some opinion. And so if you're subconsciously interested in your career, I could see that influencing things just on its own, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And I would actually amend what you said. These things aren't in the back of her mind. They're on the forefront of her mind, very much so. And I'll give you an example. I do some environmental litigation, and a lot of the experts that we hire are the hard sciences. Like we have expert geologists, for example. And it's very interesting that our experts, for example, will conduct empirical tests. Empirical tests on like the soil to determine, let's say, level of phosphorus in the soil. And and our expert comes up with a number. It's like, there's 1.2 parts per billion of phosphorus in this exact sample of soil. And then the expert from the other side will take that exact piece of soil, because there's chain of custody, and they get access to that exact sample, like the precise piece of dirt that the other expert used to conduct the sample, and they will come up with a radically different number. So I'm trying to illustrate how some of this really works. So how is that possible, right? These are measurable tests. I mean, these are instruments that you stick in that dirt, and it tells you how much phosphorus is there. And they come up very conveniently with a number that helps their case. Let's say they want a high number, because that helps their case to prove whatever it is they're trying to prove. And our expert comes up with a low amount of phosphorus, because that in the exact same piece of dirt.
Yeah. So, of course, brute force, you would just lie. But in all likelihood, what I'm guessing is happening is they might take a number of readings and only record the one that happens to match up with what they're going for. Or they have a particular method that is known for finding less or more phosphorus, and they just use that method and claim it's the gold standard for evaluating things. We saw that with Dr. Curry and Dr. Hughes. Unfortunately,
the objectivity is removed. It really is. And that's kind of what I was trying to tell you, but in our email exchanges.
Yeah, that's why for me in the trial, the one person who was a clinician that didn't have those influences was the couple therapist.
Right.
And the things that she said was she believed and observed that Amber Heard was aggressive and Johnny Depp was not.
Right.
And she heard from Amber Heard saying that Amber Heard took pride in being able to keep Johnny Depp engaged or to start conflict or something along those lines. What else did I get wrong that needs to be discussed here?
Well,
or in the comments section,
Yeah. Well, this idea, and you make an excellent point, and you've discussed this a number of times about the bullying, the bullying of Amber Heard herself, the bullying of Dr. Spiegel, certainly of her legal team. Yeah, so what people need to realize, her legal team, and I think I mentioned this to you, every one of her legal team is at the very top of the profession. I mean, they are all superb lawyers, superb. I've seen comments and videos like, oh, these clowns, they're so disrespectful and this and that. That is so far removed from reality. One example that comes to mind, there was, if you recall, Edward White, Johnny Depp's accountant, business manager. He was, during the cross-examination that was done by Ben Rottenborn, he was, asking his questions, and he was doing a perfectly good and good cross-examination, and perfectly within the guidelines of how you're trained as a lawyer to conduct such cross-examination. Mr. White had this habit of expounding on his answers. The narrative was he was this sweet old man, and Ben Rottenborn was being so disrespectful and cutting him off. That's exactly what Ben Rottenborn is supposed to do. Okay, he would be a bad lawyer if he didn't do that. Mr. Ben Rottenborn would ask him a yes or no question, and he would launch in this explanation. Frankly, he was out of line. A trial is not a discourse. It's not a date. It's not a social function. It's there are very specific sets of guidelines and rules for reasons, and those rules and guidelines have been honed by our system for decades. And in fact, the judge had scolded him, admonished him 2 or 3 times.
Because it's so easy to be biased, right? If you don't like Amber Heard and you think she's guilty, then there's really no way you're going to, unless you really check your bias, that you're going to see her legal team as being professional and competent. You're just going to think everything they're doing is wrong and stupid and even evil. I mean, people would say like Elaine is evil, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there was this snippet that went totally viral, and it was on TikTok and YouTube shorts and everywhere, of one of Amber Heard's lawyers, where he objected to his own question. Remember that?
Yeah.
And everyone was making fun of him. What a clown! He's objecting. What an idiot! He doesn't know what he's doing. He should go back to law school. This and that. Johnny Depp's attorneys did that a dozen times throughout the trial. Okay, so they did the exact same. They made the exact same error.
Well, why would that happen? I was confused.
What he meant to do, what he was trying to do, was to move to strike. Okay, to move to strike the witness's answer. Okay.
So sort of a knee-jerk reaction, like a muscle memory word. It's like,
right.
That was wrong. I object. Oh wait, I want to strike. He
exactly. And in fact, one of the occasions where Depp's legal team did the same thing, where he objected to his own question, the judge started to say something like, well, it's your, and then he said, I'm sorry, I moved to strike his answer.
So is that a normal ratio of objections? Because there was an awful lot at times.
Yeah, right. I had the same thought, and I think, at least in my experience in trials, it was higher. It was higher.
Why was it higher, do you think?
I think it's because it was a defamation case, and so much of the evidence relies on people saying stuff.
Right. And
what this guy told me. Whereas in a case, using my previous example about phosphorus in the soil, the witness isn't testifying about what some guy told him happened at a party. He's testifying about test results that he conducted on the soil. It's not about what people said. So I suspect that's why.
One of the things I was impressed by was how on the ball the lawyers are while they're sitting down. Obviously, when you're asking the questions, you're going to be on the ball, but with the objections, and the judge also was really on the ball, because in my head, I'm thinking, the judge is probably zoning out at this point, but clearly not. Like the judge, the attorneys were just laser focused on everything that's happening. And, frankly, a lot of it was boring as all get out. Like I was reminded about just how boring court hearings are, because it's been a while since I spent a lot of time, but I used to spend a lot of time in the courthouse, and I'm like, oh, there's so much just uninteresting things happening, this sort of setup that they do for questions but I was so impressed that there would be this long stretch of testimony, and then all of a sudden Camille would go, boom, object. And the judge would immediately have a response, like also, which gave me the impression that all these people are just, I don't know, their brains must just be highly attuned to this sort of stuff,
Yeah. It's practice. It takes years of practice, to develop that kind of attention.
Yeah, because especially I imagine, particularly in a defamation case, because you have to hold so many details in your head, all the people and who has said what already and what has been admitted and what you're trying to get across. What's the strategy? Should I object? Should I not? There's so many things that would play into whether or not you object, and you have to do it right away. And they always did. It was impressive to watch.
Yeah. No, and I can tell you that trials are draining. I mean, it's really a horrible experience. It's not fun.
What does it feel like?
So I was on a major trial at the beginning of this year. It was a 6-week trial. Every single day, I was billing 20 hours a day. Okay.
Wow. Meaning that you're working 20 hours and sleeping for 4?
Right. Right. Meaning that I'm at the computer or that I'm working on the case for 20 hours.
Is that 7 days a week or 5 days a week?
Oh, 7. You're working
6 weeks straight.
Yes.
Wow.
You could probably attest to this better than anybody. That's not healthy.
Yeah. Do you take a break afterwards, for a couple months?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, but the body and the brain is not designed to do that.
Yeah.
And so you are hyper focused. So especially when you're in the courtroom and it's like showtime, you are locked in and you are hyper focused, and your lack of sleep goes out the window. Your adrenaline is sky high. Your caffeine is sky high.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Especially as I get older, I'm a lot of the attorneys, Camille seems younger, but Elaine and some of the others seem about my age, maybe older. I'm thinking, how are they managing to stay awake this whole time and also just be tip-top mental condition? I'm thinking, do they have some sort of sleep, diet, caffeine, maybe some stuff on the side regimen that kind of keeps them in tip-top for 6 weeks straight?
Yeah, well, and that last one is that good. I'm going to stay away from that. But yeah. and like Elaine or some of the sort of not spring chicken folks, they will pass a lot of the work to staff attorneys. There were attorneys on the team that were never in court. So on Johnny Depp's team, for example, I think there were 3 or 4 attorneys that were in court on a daily basis. Back in the workspace in the hotel, I promise you, they had 10 more attorneys.
But you could also imagine Elaine, Camille, others probably not getting great sleep and also not getting, but because I could just imagine you have 100 attorneys in a firm or something, and the ones that rise to the top are they probably have a lot of qualities that make them succeed. But I would imagine one of the differentiating factors is the ability to keep your energy up all day, utilizing a lot of different techniques, again, good sleep, making sure that you have a good diet, making sure that you, at least in the off season, are exercising a lot, making sure your health is good. I could just imagine someone,
like an athlete almost.
Yeah, exactly like an athlete, because your brain needs to be in tip-top condition, your energy level.
That's very astute. Yes, I totally agree. So on this 6-week trial I referenced, I literally had to set alarms for myself to remind me to drink water, to remind me to go eat, to use the bathroom, so that my body physiologically was functioning correctly, so my brain would be working properly, so that my brain wouldn't be distracted by bodily needs,
Yeah, right. But I asked Allison this, rate the legal teams on both sides from 1 to 10.
So both sides, attorneys, are at the very top of their profession. But that doesn't mean that they didn't make some strategic errors. I think coaching her to look at the jury was a mistake. And then on Depp's side, I'm sure they made some errors. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Can you? Did anything stand out?
There were a couple times where I thought, but I don't know because I'm not an attorney, but I thought, there's a good question that you could ask right there. and then they just wouldn't. And I thought, oh, but of course, it doesn't matter in the end because, they won.
Yeah, right. And no, and that's a good point. And then there were a few times when I was screaming at the TV, like, okay, like keep going with that line of questioning,
Right.
like you've got them, keep going,
Right.
and they wouldn't. So yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, to your original question, I think that Depp's team made fewer strategical errors. I would rate them 8.5, 9. And the other side, I would rate them lower just because they did make some errors. So yeah, I'd rate them a 6.5. Let's say.
Okay. A lot of questions from the listeners about Elaine, thinking that she made a lot of mistakes, like in the way that she would ask questions, that she would fluster. There were a lot of objections that were sustained. She got into that kind of back and forth with the TMZ guy about like, oh, it's your 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then he slammed her. What do you think about her performance specifically?
Yeah, actually, so this is one of the most sort of fun parts of a trial, actually, is when it's truly a mano a mano and the kind of lawyer pitted against each other. When like Elaine was doing her cross-examination of, it was Amber Heard, that was the witness.
Right. She asked all these leading questions.
And Camille was just laser focused and objecting, and like she was trying to reformulate the questions in a way, and by the way, and her objections were sustained. They kept being sustained and sustained and sustained, and so she kept trying to reformulate them to try to get her question out. And there was this moment where the judge turned to Elaine and was like, "And your next question?" And Elaine said, I'm trying, Judge. I'm trying." And that was actually quite astounding to see, because she was defeated. Like, she was defeated. Camille won that battle. And then I think she had a couple more questions, and then the judge said, "What's your next question?" And she said, "Do I have any more questions, Judge? That's it."
So what was going on there? Do you think it was lack of experience or a difficult trial, or?
It was in the final week or so of the trial. And so to answer your question, I think what was going on there is what I've been alluding to, is that her mind was mush. She had zero sleep. She was operating on fumes. Like, I don't think that would have happened in the first week.
So Sheila on YouTube had a comment. She says, Amber Heard's team entered multiple pieces of duplicate evidence as separate pieces of evidence. I'd be curious about why such a big legal team in such a big trial would not catch that. There were clearly edited photos and 2 photos of the floor that were the same, 4 different exhibits, and not any of the lawyers caught it. Do you understand what Sheila is referring to there?
Yeah, I do. And the answer is I don't really know. I mean, that's a strategic. That was just a strategic error. Kind of what we're talking about.
The last question I have for you is from Peely. Is it illegal to poop in the bed? What is your legal opinion on that?
I mean, if you want a real answer, there is a real answer, which is that assault is constituted by contact with a person or anything that they are holding. So you can come up to a stranger and hit their umbrella and be charged with assault. So I don't really know what to say about the pooping in the bed.
So you're saying if Johnny Depp had been in contact, holding the bed, if you will, as the poop was happening, there could be a possible assault charge?
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't I mean, just to kind of drill down, wouldn't it also have to be demonstrated that if Amber Heard had done that, which of course we don't know, that she was intending on doing it toward him in terms of intent?
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. And actually, this is getting into criminal territory. A big piece of criminal law is intent. So yeah, to answer the listener's question in a serious way, I think they would have to show that he was there and she intended, and he was like sleeping and she intended to poop on him.
Right. Do you think she did that?
I do, because she admitted to Johnny Depp's bodyguard, Connolly, that it was a bad joke that went wrong.
Yeah, and one of the workers also had seen the poop and had also said that it clearly wasn't the dog's poop.
Right. Yeah, I think it was like the housekeeper. Or something.
Yeah, it was too big or something. Do you think that Amber Heard was ever hit in the face by Johnny Depp?
That's something that I thought a lot about and talked with colleagues about. My feeling is no.
Do you believe that he sexually assaulted her?
I don't think so, because his previous partners on they had depositions of Vanessa Paradis. All of them said that he was never violent, never sexually assaulted them. I have a hard time believing that someone who's never done that before wakes up at age 56 and starts doing these heinous acts towards their partner.
What about the jealousy allegations?
I could see that. I could be convinced of that, I think.
Okay, very last question. It's going to be a silly question. In my episodes about Grumpy, I was saying that when I was a kid, we called it Stinky. What did you call it?
Yeah, I grew up in an Italian household, and she would say caca, actually.
Caca. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that Italian, or is that just...
It's Spanish.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Attorney Craig, for coming on. And thanks for emailing with me and helping me out this whole time.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
You were sort of a legal linchpin, if you will, my LL on my emails that was grounding me, explaining things to me, helping me really to feel more confident in what I was saying.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that. And I really enjoyed our exchanges, and this has been great.
Thanks, Attorney Craig. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because why should they take care of themselves, Attorney Craig?
I believe because they deserve it, and they really, really do.